Welcome back, it's Luke Wright. I got a Verus, I said it right this time, mining video for y'all. It's the phone mining and doing it with the boxes. So we're gonna break it down like 0 to hero, where to get them, how to set up ADB, how to basically take the battery out, solder your connection, everything 0 to hero. Here we go. Starting off, first things first, I'm using Orbic Joys and I have been in my previous videos. I've used Samsung A03Ss. I'm gonna use the Orbic Joys still. It's just what I got and I still have 1,000 of them. So to set them up, we need the box. First, I get the box from sellhasher.com, which is just a supplier. I am actually the one who owns that website. We import them from China and then we basically just relist them here and ship them to you guys after a quality check and making sure they have power that supports the US and Europe clients, so switchable power supplies. With your phones, there's a few things that's really important that you're going to need to do. The first one is going to be to download DevCheck. DevCheck is an app on the Play Store where you can test and see the voltage on your phone and just test to see what they're mining at. So if you have all the same phones, you're going to want to just download it on one, set up the mining on whatever app you're doing it with, how you normally set up Verus mining. We can walk through that as well. Once you have it mining, you're going to go to DevCheck and you're going to look at what the battery is pulling for volts. Now, the Orbic Joys, in my case, pull right around 4.3 volts. So that's ideally where you want to have your power supply set to in the chassis. Now, some of these, like the ones that I have on the website, don't go down to 4.3. You can get ones that do, but these ones do not. But they do go down to around 4.55. So with the batteries in your device, every device will probably be different. Mine, with the Orbic Joys, are pretty easy to take apart and access the battery, as well as get to the BMS ribbon connector or flex cable, BMS cable, whatever you want to call it. You just take a little tape off and you have access to it on the battery, and that's what we're going to be messing with. Now, depending on what you have with your power supply, for example, my power supplies are going down to the 4.55 volts range. That's how far I can get them down. On the phones, we know that through DevCheck, they run at 4.3 volts when they're mining. Important when they're mining is when you do the DevCheck. Power supply doesn't go that low, so that will cause a little bit of an over voltage, which will trick the circuitry on the BMS cable into cutting power from the phone, even though the phone can technically run at near 5 volts if it really needed to. So since that's the case with my build here, I will actually need to snip right after the circuitry, so I just have that little flex cable that connects to the motherboard. Now, if my power supply could go all the way down to 4.3, then I could keep that circuitry on the actual flex connector and solder right to those. Before you solder, of course, you're going to need to scrape off the outer coating on the flex cable. You're going to expose the trace, which is the copper part for both the positive and the negative. Make sure you're careful, as you can scrape into the middle and that will expose the data trace as well, and you do not want to do that. After you get some nice exposure to those traces, you'll be able to solder your wire, positive and negative, to each correct side, and you'll have your cable ready to go. So there's some ADB commands that are really going to help you out. These are the commands that I'm using on my phones to make this work. Because if you plug a phone into power without the battery, it's going to get stuck in a boot loop. You're not going to really get around that unless you have probably rooted firmware. So I'm using an ADB command called ADB reboot bootloader. That takes it to fast boot mode. In the same tool pack, the SDK Android tool pack that you get ADB in, you also have a executable called fastboot.exe. This is where you can run fastboot commands. And what you're going to run is fastboot OEM space off dash mode dash charge space 0. And what this does is it removes the little battery loading screen when you have a phone that is completely off and you plug it in the power. It will boot up to a battery screen that shows the percentage and then turn off. This removes that and allows the phone to then, when it's plugged into power, automatically boot completely to the launch screen. You still have to be within the right voltage, otherwise your phone will trip up and still not fully boot. It will still get stuck a little bit. And if you don't have the right voltage for your device, which my Orbics need 4.3 and my power supply, remember, is 4.5, you need to use the second method that I explained with the BMS connector, where you cut the circuitry off and you solder directly onto the flex cable. What this does is it doesn't allow the phone to be tricked or trip off, and will allow you to boot your phone up by using that. The only problem with this now is that your phone gains some sort of temperature from the battery to make sure that it's there and it's okay. So your phone will think that the battery is actually at -200 Fahrenheit, which is just crazy. So there's an ADB command that you can use, which I will post on the screen, that will allow you to set that battery fake when it's turned on to the percentage where it can be operable. And it's the same thing goes for how we set the battery so that the phone doesn't die. It's all technically fake and it tricks the phone while the phone's on. Now, every time that the phone turns off and boots on, you'll have to do this. But luckily, the script that I'm running will automatically do it for you. We can see that the script is working as it's operating on a few phones here. Eventually go, opens up Userland, is in the terminal, and it will type up to get to the pool, which will be great. And bam, it's mining. I recommend to do, and after multiple tries, this is the fastest way that I'm going to be able to get all 1,000 of these phones in boxes and done, is going to be using and setting up your phones first. So I've made some scripts for you. If you use OrbicJoys, you're in luck. If you use another phone, you might have to edit them, but it's not too hard. It's Python. You could ask ChatGPT, and it probably might be able to help you out these days. These scripts will run through and uninstall all the unneeded bloatware that you get with installation, the majority of the bloatware. You can use a tool called UAD, which is Universal Android Debloater tool. It does work for some phones. I couldn't get my Orbix to show up on it, despite others having Orbix that got theirs to show up on it. Anyway, my script does work. It goes through and it deletes absolutely everything, which is exactly what I want. From there, I have another script that will install Userland, which is a terminal for Ubuntu. You can use Termux as well. You'll have to edit it if you want to use it for Termux with the script. I might actually have a script. We'll put it in the GitHub as well. The next script that installs Userland then goes through and it sets up the miner itself. So it will install Userland on the device. It will open the device. It will open Userland. It will then set up basically Ubuntu, set up your login and your password, get you in the terminal, and then it will actually start downloading where I personally have my Verus miner client that I already have pre-compiled. It's basically just forked from everybody else who uses it, and then I have my own config set, which you can set in there as well. So it'll be linked to my GitHub. After using these scripts, your phone should be set up with Userland, as well as having almost every app cleared from them that you really do not need. That's when you can go ahead and actually start removing the battery. Now, before you do this, note that when you do use this process, you're going to want to make sure that you can connect to your phone after getting rid of the battery. Now, I leave the screens on my device. However, with another ADB command, you can turn off the screen after it's running, which is actually pretty cool. It will still run everything in the background, but your screen will be off. And yes, it does use less watts. Now, I have a box of 20 phones, and 20 phones are running right around 100 watts. Now, if I turn the screens actually off of this box, I'm getting that down to around 90, which doesn't seem like much, but when you have 50 boxes up and running, I'll save 10 watts per box, and that's a lot for me. So one last important thing is make sure that the computer that you're gonna run this next script on, which is the monitoring script, it recognizes connected ADB devices. It puts them in a list of connected, disconnected, and I believe reconnected. I forgot how I labeled it. But you'll need to basically take those devices, connect them to the computers that they're going to be connected to later on that's running the script, so that you can enable the computer connection to your phone. It will ask you and prompt you, do you trust this device? And you want to make sure you select always allow. And you want to do that on every computer or whatever computer you're eventually running this on. So I have a main computer where I run all the scripts, but then I run my monitor script on a separate computer where I put the boxes. So I need to plug the phone into both of those computers to have the trusted ID in those phones. And I would also recommend doing that before you take out the battery and before you get it in the case, because it is a tight fit. Now that you have this done, you're going to put 20 devices into the case, or however many devices. You want to still make sure that you have all your miners installed, configs set up, meaning that your config and your address and your pool that you want to use is set in those config options. Then you can make sure the batteries are removed, plug them in to the motherboard that connects all the phones together, plug that motherboard into your computer, power the case on, and let it run with the monitor script. So now with the press of a button, we are now running the script, and we'll see as they boot up. It's starting up a ADB terminal, which it did successfully on port 5037. And it will go from there. And bam, it's mining. You can also get confirmations because it's opening up Userland on your computer. It is good to check because sometimes it won't do it if you don't have it set up right or the timing is off on your device. If a phone happens to go offline and crashes for some reason, the script knows this, so it'll automatically put it right back online, which is extremely awesome. This is what I got for you. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and remember to check out sellhasher.com. That's the website where you can get these. If you have questions, please ask me. I am answering all the questions. You can get a hold of me on Twitter. That's probably the best place to get a hold of me. And yeah, have a good one.